Hello, everyone. Welcome to the 2019 Brain Health Online Summit Training Series. I am Amy Zellmer from Faces of TBI, and I am a survivor from a fall on the ice in February of 2014. And myself, along with Dr. Jeremy Schmo from Midwest Functional Neurology Center, we saw a need in the brain injury community for more training and education on alternative healthcare methods and modalities for those suffering from the lingering effects of brain injury. Each week during the summit, you will hear from presenters who will share their experience either working with brain injury survivors, or you'll hear their own real-life experience of living with a brain injury. For today's episode, I am here with Sharik Peck from ResiMax, and Sharik is a licensed physical therapist with a master's degree in counseling, and he has dedicated his career to finding natural ways to heal the brain and body. His passion for natural healing developed out of his own journey and recovery from breaking his neck and back and sustaining brain injuries, including a vertebral artery dissection stroke in 1986. Sharik's personal research led to the study of IASTM, guaja, acupressure, taping, and vibration, and their impact on the body and mind. One night, Sharik awoke with a distinct impression that vibration can be used to aid in the healing of the human nervous system. He then threw himself into searching for the perfect tool that would target the areas of chronic pain and muscles that hold on to stress and tension. He simply could not find the right tool to help people the way that he knew they could be helped, so he decided to create one himself. So welcome to the summit, Sharik. We're so happy to have you here.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here with you all.
So Sharik, before we jump into your presentation, why don't you share a little bit of your personal background of being a brain injury survivor yourself?
You bet. My brain injury occurred actually it was July 3rd, 1986. I was wrestling, and towards the end of the match, I was ahead by a long ways in points, so I was just kind of stalling, being a little out of shape. The gentleman that I was wrestling reached up and grabbed a hold of my head and had me in a headlock. And for 30 seconds, he yanked and yanked and yanked on my head and tried to get my shoulders down. And somewhere along that process, I ruptured a vertebral artery. Now, there's just four main arteries that go into your brain, and I tore one of them. That caused just an acute, very fast change in my entire life. I spent the next few weeks in an intensive care unit and trying to learn how to be able to stand again, and then learning how to walk and how to feed myself. I lost the use of the left side of my body and spent just months and months before I could even get past the point of just being able to walk, once I could do that without another device. So I spent the next several years trying to figure out how to get my brain back on track. You see, my physical body got functioning better much quicker than my brain did. And that was quite a journey. But after several years of doing that, I looked at what profession I ought to do in life, and it seemed like being a physical therapist would be the best thing that I could do to try and help people in the way that I had been helped.
And that's kind of what brought you here where you are, right?
It definitely was a game changer for me. Since then, I've completed a number of marathons, triathlons. I've been very active. I've got 7 children. I've been married to one beautiful lady for all of these years, and I've been a physical therapist now for about 25 years, and it's been a wonderful profession. But I really, all my profession and all this time, I've been trying to figure out how to be able to help people better, how to be able to help them not just relieve their symptoms for a few hours or for a few days, but how to make life changes that can get their brain back on track and get them functioning much better in life and family. That's what I've been about.
Yeah. And I had the pleasure of meeting you, gosh, when was it? October, when I spoke at the Utah Brain Injury Conference. And you showed me your Resimax tuner, and you like kind of did it all over my body and showed me how to use it. And I was just so impressed with it. I was like, I feel amazing right now. So I'm really excited for you to share with everyone today basically what you shared with me that day at the conference. So maybe let's just kind of jump right into your slideshow here.
Great, I'd be happy to. Now, this is a takeoff from a presentation I did for a dental association this last year. But essentially, the same information that we share with the dentists holds true to anybody in the head injury arena. And if you can get the trigeminal nerve to calm down, you get the brain to function better. And I want to show you that through this presentation. And hopefully I keep it at a level where those who have had a brain injury, like I have had and you have had, and those who are medical practitioners, I hope I can speak to both groups as we go through this presentation. So the big question is, how do you live your life? Are you in a constant fight or flight mode, or are you constantly trying to just get food into the system and worrying about the predators? Are you constantly under stress and strain, or are you being able to enjoy every moment that goes by? Enjoy all the little things that are happening. In essence, in the psychology world, we say it this way: are you here with us in the present, or are you living in the future? If you're living in the future, we call that anxiety. Are you living in the past? If you're living in the past, we call that depression. If you're living right here and being able to be present and enjoy the experiences that are happening, and not even if it's just enjoying, but being able to recover from the things that are happening each day. That's a very different state of the brain. So how do you live your life? Well, there are lots of things that keep our nervous system fired up. I'm not going to get into a lot of those in this discussion. It's for somebody to have with you that has a lot more ability to treat you. But there are pathologies that can cause the nervous system to be fired up as well. And some of those pathologies are caused by your traumatic brain injury. I'll give you a good example. Oftentimes after a whiplash injury, the omohyoid, one of the neck muscles, is oftentimes injured during that process. And that keeps a constant fired up state of the nervous system, these injuries and pathologies. But let's talk a little bit about synthetic neuromodulators. Now, it seems like a big name, but all we're saying is when you take a substance into your body and you're hoping that it can have an effect on your nervous system, an effect on your body, you're hoping that it can help you feel better, it's a bit of a tricky game. You see, let me back up here just a little bit, sorry. I think I just...
Going the wrong way.
Am I going the wrong way?
Yeah. There you go.
Hey! All right, so there we are back at our synthetic neuromodulators. Well, if you look at how many things, let's say you're just taking something to try and affect your headaches, but you have so many stops along the nervous system route that can be affected by those chemicals that you take in. It's a delicate dance when you take a lot of synthetic neuromodulators into the nervous system. And your body already produces a significant number. Your body produces over 100 neurotransmitters. Now, you've heard of some of these chemicals. But let's talk about them in relation to keeping the body fired up or to allowing the body to heal. One of those chemicals is dopamine. That's a great chemical. Makes you feel really good. Serotonin is another great chemical. Allows you to sleep well at night. Allows you to remember things. Oxytocin, one of my favorite chemicals. I tell my wife I need a good dose of oxytocin on a regular basis. One of the things that increases oxytocin is being very close to your loved ones. Acetylcholine, that's a great chemical. In fact, that was the first neurotransmitter ever discovered back in the early 1920s. Then we need to visit about cortisol and adrenaline. Cortisol and adrenaline are very much the stress chemicals. They're very important for when we need them, but if they're fired up all the time, it causes problems. So let's see if we can look at what that means. If you think of adrenaline and cortisol as the fight or flight or fear response, it's there to give you immediate energy and increase your heart rate and increase your blood pressure and boost your strength, right? That's how 4 or 5 normally puny people can lift a car off of an individual, right? They all had a healthy dose of adrenaline running through them. The problem is if you've got that stuff running through you all the time and it doesn't know how to shut off on a regular basis, this is the problem. You get a lot of stomach upset, brain fog, anxiety, sleep disturbances. You know, if you go back up to stomach upset, I had for the longest time a hard time understanding what the stomach upset had to do with the fight or flight process. But I think I discovered it. I came across some writings that helped me understand. You see, cortisol is dumped into the stomach immediately during the fight or flight process. And when cortisol is dumped into the stomach, its job is to paralyze that whole digestive system. Think of it this way. If you're going to need a lot of energy and you need to run or to fight, you don't want to be sitting there lollygagging and taking care of your last meal. You want to get it out of your stomach and get rid of it and paralyze that intestinal system so that you can have all of the strength out in the muscles, out in the legs to run. Anyway, these chemicals, it's a fine balance.
And I think, before, you know, Sharik, looking at that list on the right, and that's like every symptom every brain injury survivor has. I mean, the only thing that's not, oh no, you do have sleep on there, sleep disturbances. And, you know, how, can you briefly explain the how our fight or flight gets stuck in the on position? What is causing that to happen?
Well, this is
you can live like this for years. I was in this state for 2.5 years.
I have seen individuals that have been in it for decades.
Yeah.
And it's not a, well, let me see if I can explain it to you in both terms of psychology with my background in counseling, as well as the physical process from my therapy background. So what happens is when you go through a traumatic experience, your brain does some immediate things because it's flooded with cortisol and adrenaline, and your brain wires the experience. It hardwires the experience into the system. In essence, your brain is saying, whatever happens in the rest of our existence, I don't want to go through that again. And so your brain, it's designed to hardwire both good experiences, like the best experiences in your life. They're hardwired into your brain and your heart. Those bad experiences are also hardwired in. But the way the nervous system functions, the way your brain functions, it is designed to try and keep you from repeating those terrible experiences. And so it will get stuck in just reliving portions of your injury. I'll give you an example. After my stroke, I spent the next several years, and probably, as I recall, probably a dozen years, where I would just be sleeping or on the brink of sleeping, and I would kick into a panic attack. My body would jerk, my heart would start racing. If I was asleep, I would oftentimes be dreaming that I was falling off of a large building. Those chemicals were flowing in my brain, and I think my dreams just tried to make sense of them. But I would wake up in a sweat and with my heart racing. We call those panic attacks. But all it really is the brain having to deal with. It rose to a whole new level of spitting out those fight or flight chemicals when you went through your traumatic experience. Mm-hmm. And you have to train the brain to get back out of that mode, to get back into healing mode for most of us. And so those chronic sleep disturbances, the brain fog, that can go on and on and on unless we can reset several of those systems and bring us back into a calm, healthy, healing state. Does that make sense to you?
It does. Yeah. Yep. Absolutely. I think that's so helpful for some of our listeners because they don't, I know for me, I didn't understand that my body was stuck in fight or flight. I knew like I was in a fight or flight. Like I had constant anxiety. I couldn't sleep, but I didn't know what exactly it was. And then, when I met Dr. Jeremy, he explained it all to me and he helped me get through it. But, so many people are stuck in these phases. They know they're stuck, but they don't know why they're stuck. And I think this will be helpful for them to see that.
Well, and a true healer, a true miraculous practitioner is going to take every good tool they can find to help be able to get the brain back on track, because that's where healing truly occurs. Yep.
You have to kind of give it a reset.
Exactly. Well, and that's what, after your brain injury, after my brain injury, I would have enjoyed having serotonin in plenitude because that helps us sleep better. That helps our mood. It helps us be able to learn better. And so many of us after a brain injury have lost that ability, at least for a while, to be able to learn and retain things. The problem is when serotonin is running high and we're sleeping better and we're digesting better, that's all good. But the serotonin, under a stress state in the nervous system, serotonin plummets. In fact, one of the reasons why we're given so many SSRIs is to try and keep a level of serotonin up in the nervous system. But
I'm going to have you just define what that is. I know what it means, but I don't know that everyone listening is going to know what SSIs are.
So the SSRIs are selective serotonin reuptake inhibitors. There are antidepressants, our main antidepressant medications. And their job is to try and help your body that doesn't feel really good and your brain that doesn't really feel good. And so the natural mechanism is to not keep a lot of serotonin in the system. What the SSRIs do is they keep the body from uptaking the serotonin. In essence, they kind of keep a tired amount of serotonin still running through the system. They won't let the body reabsorb it into the normal process. So what ends up happening is a person will not feel quite as badly as they used to feel, but at the same time, they can't feel quite as alive either, because it's not the normal process. Serotonin is meant to be taken in during fight or flight, and it's meant to be pushed back out into the system when we're calm and at rest and at peace. Is that making some sense there?
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, during a stress state, when cortisol and adrenaline are running in high amounts, serotonin is not able to function very well. It is pulled back into the system to wait for a better day when things are more calm to try and digest. So you see a lot of those same problems: depression, sleep problems, loss of appetite, mood swings, all kinds of stuff you don't want to have. By the way, this bottom one, overeating, why is that associated with not having enough serotonin, happy serotonin running around?
I don't know.
Well, this is one of the things that we find in depression and a lot of other conditions as well. Eating can produce, at least temporarily, that sense of well-being, and so your body will produce some more serotonin. It's a way to get that serotonin level up. The problem is most of our overeating will be with packaged and processed foods and things that are really quick fixes, or caffeine. And so we'll overeat the wrong things, and our brain gets a little burst of serotonin, but it's kind of on a false premise. It doesn't have it coming in the right way. And so it adds into that imbalance and goes into the weight gain process. So that's serotonin, a beautiful chemical. If you look at a few statistics and overlay those with those health conditions and with those that understanding of the chemistry, I want you to look at a couple of interesting things. 90 to 96% of people that suffer from jaw pain are females. There's a lot of Americans suffering from TMJ, aren't there? About 70% of those who suffer migraine headaches are women. About 90 to 92% of those who suffer from fibromyalgia are female. I wonder, what's the statistic between those who have had a head injury and the development of fibromyalgia? I'll bet it's quite high.
Yeah, I was going to say, I'm sure it's really high. And chronic fatigue syndrome too.
And again, we seem to affect our females a lot more in the chronic fatigue syndrome, fibromyalgia, jaw pain, headaches, and irritable bowel syndrome. Why do we have more females that seem to suffer and probably don't get the right treatment after a head injury compared to their counterparts? Well, you have to look at some of the brain differences to be able to understand that issue. I have a little white thing at the bottom of the screen there. It says, who has 9.5 times more white matter? And this is just to give you that, that question. It seemed to me growing up and even going through school, I thought, well, a brain is a brain. We all have a brain, right? Seems like they're all the same. But actually, if you get down to the basics, the brains are very different, and they're gender differences. So who has 9.5 times more white matter? Females. Well, if our brains are about the same size, what's filling up the heads of men? I know a lot of females have wondered that question. But actually, we have a little different substance in our brain. We have 6.5 times on average more gray matter in the male brain. Those are brain differences that are in the equation that need to be addressed when a person's had a head injury. Because what does white matter do and what does gray matter do? White matter is the very fast, amazing speed of lightning processing that happens for the female brain. That's what gives you the ability to multitask so much. Well, if I've had a brain injury and a female's had a brain injury and we set us next to each other, I'm not used to processing all that fast. But the female brain that is feels like it's just been drugged through a ringer. So there's a lot of that brain fog that comes with those white matter blood or white matter neurons not firing very well. So there's some differences between the brains and genders, but let's talk about one more component, and then I'll bring them all in together. So we talked about the the nervous system and how it functions and those chemicals, right? We'll talk a little bit about the brain differences between males and females and children and adults. Well, if you look at the branches of the nervous system, this would be our third component. We look at specifically, there's 12 nerves that go straight into the brain. I think of them like playing Monopoly. They don't pass go. They don't pass gel. They get to go straight to go every time.
Yeah.
These are the messengers that can go straight to the brain. And there's 12 of those. In particular, there are a number of those nerves that have access to the calming part of the nervous system. This trigeminal nerve is not one of them. I mean, it has a few fibers dedicated to calming you down, but hardly any. Most of its job is to fire you up and to help keep food going down into the system. Its job is to open the mouth, close the mouth, protrude it, retract it. Its job is to do everything in that whole facial region. Let me see if I can take you through that. Here are some of the muscles involved in the trigeminal nerve: the masseter muscle, the temporalis, the medial internal pterygoid. Those are all great muscles of chomping, clenching. Mm-hmm. And oftentimes when a person has had a head injury, their jaw goes into that shut down, clamp down mode, or they start grinding a lot and grinding off their teeth. Anyway, that cranial nerve number 5 is a very big part of that fight or flight process. In fact, that's what it looks like going through the stress response.
You know, when I, several months after I fell, I thought I had a toothache. I went to the dentist, and he's the dentist I've been going to for years. And he looked in my mouth and he said, "Have you had an accident or injury lately or a trauma?" And I just kind of looked at him. I was like, "Yeah." And he's like, "Yeah, you're clenching." He's like, "I can tell, you know, from the wear pattern on your teeth that you're clenching at night." And I'm like, so he could tell that it was new. Like, it wasn't something I've been doing forever. So he knew that something had triggered it. And I thought that was really fascinating. I had no idea I was clenching at night. Once he made it aware to me, I noticed I was doing it during the day too. I would notice I would catch myself clenching, not like full on clenching, but like, you know, just kind of clenching those muscles. And it must be like some sort of a comfort tool or something to us. I don't know what causes us to clench like that. But I thought it was really fascinating. And I know you're going to talk a little more about it, but yeah, I thought that was really fascinating that he took one look in my mouth and knew that I had been through some sort of injury or trauma.
Well, it's interesting to me as a physical therapist working with a lot of people who have been through injuries and accidents. They oftentimes don't equate the fact that they've been through a head injury with the fact that they've been to the dentist a lot more in the time since then, and that they've had these problems with clenching or in my case, I went through a very stressful time about a dozen years ago, and I actually broke my 2 back molars. That happens actually during that clenching process. In fact, research in that area among our dentists, we find that people clench more during the nighttime. They generate far more forces during the nighttime than they ever do during their waking day, when they're eating, when they're talking, when they're using their mouth. They just don't generate those forces. But it all happens during sleep when the body's trying to recover. Tells us you're not recovering very well. You're not sleeping very well. It's fascinating.
It is.
If you look at a few more of those parasympathetic powerhouses, though, that carry a lot of fibers of the parasympathetic system, cranial nerve number 3, that's one of the eye nerves. I think that nerve forms the basis for why EMDR and some of those techniques can really help people who have had brain injuries and traumas. Cranial nerve number 7 has a lot of fibers dedicated to that parasympathetic system. Cranial nerve number 9, you know, an interesting one with cranial nerve number 9 that's helped us be able to treat this. You see, it's involved in taste and eating. Some of the things that we'll do when I treat somebody, sometimes I'll use an essential oil that's food grade, and I'll put it on their mouth, on the back of their tongue, where that nerve can help us get those fibers that are dedicated to the parasympathetic system back into calm down mode. I love that. But really the powerhouse of all is that cranial nerve number 10. It's called the vagus nerve. And here's what it looks like. And here's its job. Prevent inflammation. Yes, we definitely need that.
Mm-hmm.
Strengthen memory. Well, if you look at it with that brain fog issue, when you're having a lot of brain fog and a lot of cortisol and adrenaline running through the system, that's part of that fog in the system. The vagus nerve is not functioning very well when you're in that fight or flight mode. It helps you breathe, relaxation, inhibits depression, controls your blood pressure. It's a great nerve, as you can see, goes just all everywhere down to the bottom of the abdomen area. And a lot of it is dedicated, 71% is dedicated to getting you back on track, sleeping well, producing more offspring. Its job is to help you find happiness in life. Oh yeah, there's a distinct branch of the vagus nerve that controls your vocal cords. I want you to think about that. Those of you who are seeing this, think about that recurrent laryngeal branch of the vagus nerve that is responsible for your ability to communicate, because it becomes very important in your ability to heal. There's so much that comes from intonation and vocalization that is part of the healing response. And so much about yelling, screaming, etc., that's part of shutting down that vagus nerve. Isn't that interesting that a direct branch has a very strong vibration component? That becomes important to my world. I want to tell you about one more little important connection. These 4 muscles back here, the rectus capitis posterior minor and major, and the levator scapula and the omohyoid, have very important common connections. But really, here's something that we found, probably 15 years ago in the anatomy world, and that is those 4 muscles, these rectus capitis at C1, C2, have a direct connection with the brain. That connection is called a myodural bridge. Myo meaning muscle, dural meaning the covering over the brain. You might think of it as a tensioner. After you've had a head injury, the tension is all off in the nervous system. And that tensioner, the reason you have a lot of headaches and pain in the back of your neck is because that tensioner is unhappy. Mm-hmm. Think of that in regards to those chemicals. And we've got to have some way to treat those areas.
And that's why those migraine meds don't help because it's muscular.
That's why they have limited effect, not just because there's so many things they've got to affect, but if you're not changing the tensioner, then you're not changing the pattern for the migraine headache sufferer. And it's all about changing the pattern to get the brain back on track, right? Mm-hmm. Well, this is my grandbaby. She came out with one heck of a cone head because her mom had been in labor with her for, oh my goodness, hours and hours and hours. And it gave me a lot to think about with the head and all that it goes through.
Yeah.
You can see our little invention in the background there. It was a critical part to helping this little mother and this little baby get here and recover, because we ran some resonant frequencies through her that are a very big part of healing. So here's what we created, this invention we developed. It has 10 preset levels of intensity, and it creates resonance. Now, what is resonance? It's a fancy name for vibration, but it's more of a musical term. the resonance that we create in this device is very calculated, very calming, and very much in the healing range. We also developed these algorithm patterns into the device that give the brain a song, if you will, a song related to healing. Our device ranges between 20 and 110 hertz, depending on how you measure it. But essentially what that says is we can calm it down to the very gentlest of level that will allow that little baby to enjoy it. And we can also ramp it up to a highest level that allows her father to also take that pain and tension out of his jaw and the back of his neck as well. It's got a very powerful lithium-ion battery in it. I do a lot of humanitarian work, and the one thing I found out from being out in the jungles in Ecuador is you don't want to rely on electricity.
Yeah.
And so I needed a real strong battery system, and I didn't want it to run out of electricity, because what happens if you're doing treatment for an hour and you've worked on 15 individuals and you've got 70 more to work on and you're out of battery? Well, we created this device so that you could go for about 8 to 10 hours on one single charge. We also developed these little fascia wings into the device. You can see those barely in the edge of the device there. The fascia wings allow you to do a technique called gua sha. This was introduced to us by the Chinese and those in the Eastern countries, where it's been working for years and years and centuries and millennia. They use the scraping as a way to wake up the nervous system. Well, we do that technique, but we use the vibration to help engage the brain in the process, and very much working on engaging the vagus nerve at every step along the way. That's our healing system. That's our target. That's another picture of the device that we created. Here's a little bit of research that we were involved in that appeared in Oral Health Journal in March of last year. We asked a university group to research 3 areas. The top of the eyebrows, right midway through those eyebrows is a branch of your trigeminal nerve. The back of your neck, where we put this point right on those rectus, captus, posterior, minor, and major muscles. So we're decreasing the tension coming out of the brain. And this point inside the mouth, where we go against bilateral, both sides, the trigeminal nerve directly through the masseter muscle. And those 3 techniques studied for 1 minute. Here's what we found. This was our pre-study on almost every female that we tested. We just did this test on females because I wanted to see that response in them. What it showed was this is a masseter muscle. This is using ultrasound elastography. And in this masseter muscle, you have very little blood flow. You might consider these yellow points as trigger points in the muscle. So a very, very tight tension on these masseter muscles. 3 minutes of treatment, and all of this increase in redness and the tension in the jaw decreased by at least 50%. That happened in all of our cases. Our p-value was 0.000. Every single one of our cases responded the same, had at least a 50% reduction in jaw tension with these 3 minutes of treatment. By the way, the control group that we studied had no difference between their pre-study and just using the device, but without the vibration running through it. So we created a powerful little tool to calm down cranial nerve number 5 using the parasympathetic system, especially provided through cranial nerve 7, 9, and 10, and 3. Carefully applied resonance or vibration through those cranial nerves is best. And don't forget, the vocal cords are tremendous for helping a person to be able to heal. So we just use a couple of key ways to get the brain back on track. Can I mention one other thing that I like to have my clients do, Amy?
Sure.
This is an important takeaway. As we talked about how thought processes can actually improve your chemicals running through you, or if you're thinking about stressful, painful things all the time, they can plummet and they can keep you down in the basement with your chemicals, right? When we stimulate the brain, the very best response, and we can stimulate it from the feet, from the torso, from the neck, all kinds of points here. But while you're humming to that, and while you're stimulating the brain through those nerve endings, a very powerful technique that we learned from psychology, cognitive behavioral therapy, we just ask you to focus your brain on those things that are most important to you, those things that are part of your healing process, memories of things that you're grateful for, your best experiences in your life. The more you can focus your brain on those things that are healing for your brain, the more you will create an environment of happiness inside the brain where it can heal from trauma.
Mm-hmm. Sharik, I'm going to have you unshare your screen now.
Sure.
And I just want it to, let's see here. There we go. And I've got my little guy here, my little Tuner Pro. And I have been using this. I try to use it every night. Some nights I forget, but I'd say 80% of the time I'm using it every night, like for 3 to 5 minutes. I really like to use it on the top of my head. And then, right through here. And right here, like you were showing, those eyebrows. That feels amazing. And then I go all along and down through here and inside the mouth. But I'm feeling so amazing using that. And I'm kind of a, I don't know, am I a hippie or am I a bohemian? I like to have my crystals. I'll usually have a crystal in my hand while I'm using it. I use my essential oils. I kind of like blend all my modalities together when I'm using it.
That's not a problem. That's just that's making a cookie recipe.
Yep. So I'm loving this little guy. And I'm, like I said, that day at the conference when you used it on me, you showed me how to use it everywhere. You used it on my head, my arms, my legs, my feet, my back. I had a kink in my back the other day, so I took this part off and just put him right here and leaned against my chair for a few minutes. That kink was gone. I was like, I'm so amazed. But I'm really loving this little guy. And, I convinced Jeremy to get one for the clinic, and I know his patients are really liking it as well. And you also have an offer for our listeners.
I do.
Mm-hmm.
I do. I have an offer for the listeners. I think it takes 30% off to order through our website. Our website is www.rezzimax, R-E-Z-Z, that's for your sleep, REZZIMAX.com, rezzimax.com. You use the code FACES of TBI.
Yeah.
All
lowercase.
One word, no spaces, FACES of TBI, and it takes 30% off for those of you who have found us through the FACES of TBI system.
Yeah. Well, we really appreciate that. It's an amazing tool. I feel like any clinician listening should definitely look into it. And, for a consumer, it's not terribly expensive. And I'm so happy I got one. I'm loving this thing, Sharik. I'm not just saying that either. When Jeremy ordered his at the conference, you gave me one to take home. And I told Jeremy I was using that sucker on my way home as I traveled home. And I just went on a 2-week road trip, and I have a big road trip coming up. And I take that with me. He goes in his little travel case, and he goes with me, and I use him every night. So I'm really noticing. I guess it makes sense. I was going to say I'm noticing my personal vibrational level is higher. And I guess that makes sense. I'm using vibration to raise my vibration. So I'm feeling really great using it.
Well, it should get your vagus nerve functioning better. It does take time. I mean, how long have you been in a dysfunctional state off and
Right.
on? It does
Right.
take time, but by the time a person gets to, 2 or 3 months, oftentimes they can just hum and bring their vibration level up once they've trained it enough with our little device.
Yeah. Well, Sharik, thank you so much for being part of our summit. This is such great information, and I think it's really very critical for people to understand, you're stuck in that fight or flight. You can't get better if you're stuck in that fight or flight. We have to be able to find a way to get out of it.
We've got to find safety for the system or it can't heal.
Yeah. Yeah. So thank you so much for being a part of the summit. Thank you, everyone who's been watching, and I will see you all again in the next episode.